What is up? Welcome into Wednesday, April the 28th edition of Roughing the Kicker, a daily Kansas City Chiefs podcast on arrowheadreport.com. I'm your host, Tucker Franklin, and joining me today is Arrowhead Report's NFL draft analyst and really just all-around analyst. It's Jordan Foote. Jordan, how you doing, my man?
Tucker, good buddy. It feels like it's been like 8 years since I've been on the podcast, but in reality, it's probably been less than a week. It's just with draft stuff coming up and the Orlando Brown trade, and then we were going to do an emergency pod, then we didn't do an emergency pod. So just a lot has happened since then, and that's kind of a good thing because we've been waiting for some fun Chiefs news to talk about.
We really have been. And when we last talked, I believe that was on Friday when we last talked. It was, all right, let's hope the Chiefs do something. And then they did something, thankfully, for our content. And it had a lot to do with what they're going to be doing tomorrow. Tomorrow's the draft, Jordan. Can you believe that? Holy cow.
I,
I
I,
just realized that.
it's insane. It is absolutely insane, dude. Like it with that 100 and 100 series, and then just every day looking. I guess sometimes multiple guys in a day, sometimes taking a couple days off, but then doing those reports every day at least and prepping for it has been insane. And it feels simultaneously like it's been a couple years doing that, but also like a week doing that. It's weird, but the draft is here, and I'm really looking forward to it. Even though the Chiefs kind of their slate of picks is different than what we thought it was going to be even a week ago.
It is very different. But Jordan, before we dive into the draft, I kind of want to get your thoughts on the Orlando Brown trade. Because as you mentioned, we thought about doing bonus episodes. We thought about doing bonus mock drafts. We just couldn't get in like our schedules to line up stuff like that on this weekend. But what are your thoughts on the trade for Orlando Brown?
I like it, man. I mean, I think it's hard to not like it. You give up that 31st pick. Look, the odds of that 31 pick becoming a two-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro, or whatever accolades Brown has already in his young career, pretty low. Like you're taking a shot on an unproven player who hasn't played yet in the NFL. You don't know if they have that ceiling that Orlando Brown has. Really, at 31, with a lot of the tackles in this year's class, you don't even know if they're going to stick at tackle long term. Like they could move inside to guard. So I'm not big, or I'm not making a big deal rather about giving up the picks and the pick swaps and all that stuff. You got a second round pick back, and the Chiefs can still do some damage with 58 and 63. Not having the third is weird. I don't think it's necessarily bad. Then you've got, I believe it's 4 day 3 picks that you can still kind of fill out the roster with. And if Brett Veach has taught us anything, it's at the end of the draft on day 3, he's going to find him some players, whether it be round 4, 5, 6, or 7. So I like the trade. I think the money aspect is going to be interesting, but his intro presser was fantastic. Seems like a great guy who's really excited to be in KC. And I think that everyone in KC should be excited that he's happy to be here.
Said all the right things in his introductory press conference, as you mentioned, Jordan. And it was one of those guys where you're like, man, I'm glad he's on my football team. Seems like a genuinely great guy. Was really happy to be a part of the Chiefs organization and was happy to be protecting Patrick Mahomes. I think one of his quotes was, Patrick Mahomes won't get touched, period, because of me or something like that,
Yep.
which is something, if you're an offensive lineman, that you should be saying because Patrick Mahomes is the crown jewel of this city. He does not need to be hurting at all like he was in the Super Bowl. But as Jordan mentioned, the Chiefs do get a second round pick in return. We've talked a lot about the compensation return on the previous 2 podcasts on Monday with Mark Van Sickle and on Tuesday with Jim Moore Jr. Both of those really break down the trade, I think, from different angles, different perspectives. I really liked picking Jim Moore's brain about,
Mm-hmm.
what the behind the scenes workings are for NFL drafts, what he thinks they are for trades to everything like that. That was kind of fun. And he brought up a scenario to me about trading maybe 58 and 63 and the Chiefs trading up. That could be a possibility. Would not shock me if Brett Veach did that. Would not completely floor me at all if Brett Veach decided to continue to be aggressive and trade up and go get a guy. But when you look at the trade charts from Jimmy Johnson that are out there, there's other types of trade charts out there, but the Jimmy Johnson one is the one that I mainly look at. It looks like these combination of picks will only get the Chiefs up to about 34, 35-ish. So wouldn't quite get them into the first round where they wanted, only the area that they traded back from. So kind of interesting. So do you think this qualifies as Brett Veach's first trade back then, Jordan?
I'm gonna say no, just because it didn't happen during the draft. I mean, I
That's fair.
guess kind of, but still, it was an aggressive move, viewed as aggressive. It wasn't a we don't like the board, so we're gonna trade back. So I'm gonna lean no, even though it was a really solid move by him. And
Hmm.
man, I'm not gonna complain that Brett Veach doesn't have a first round pick at his disposal, and that's not really an indictment on Brett Veach as a first round drafter early in the draft. But I think that if you can get a proven commodity at a position of need, a young, proven player that has a really high ceiling. The contract, look, the money is always going to be a worry spot with the Chiefs because they have Mahomes, they have Chris Jones, they have Kelsey, they have Hill, they have Matthew. Look, money's just going to come and go, and the Chiefs are going to have a top heavy roster. That's why these drafts are so important, to get some future players that can fill out the roster and be depth. So it's kind of a trade back, but kind of not a trade back at the same time. And I think that eventually, look, Veach is going to be the GM for the foreseeable future. I think he will eventually trade back in the draft, but this one, I don't think he's going to wheel and deal within the draft. But that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I guess if you consider this one a trade back, you would also have to consider the Frank Clark trade a trade back as well.
Yep.
So I don't think that it would be considered that. But Jordan and I talked about maybe doing a little 11.5 mock draft before we start on today's 12.0. But if you're following Jordan and I on Twitter at footnoted at Tucker D Franklin, you'll see that we've been tweeting out our own mock drafts. And if you want to know what we think, what we thought after the trade, draft wise, we've got tweets there. I know Jordan tweeted out a 4-pack of mocks. I tweeted out a 4-pack of mocks. I think there are some pretty solid options here for the Chiefs to draft at number 58, number 63. So let's go ahead and get right into it then, if you're good with that, Jordan.
Yep, that sounds good, man. It's we've been tweeting out a lot of mocks lately, and while you're setting
Yeah.
up the board, man, it's the Chiefs have a ton of options. They have choices. They can go different directions at different picks. They can trade back if they don't like the board. I know that now that I figured out how to do the trade back thing, or trade up, I guess it's something that I've utilized, but I try to just kind of stick with what the Chiefs have because it's hard to predict what they're going to do. But also, I think that's why we've been using this aggressive setting, because it's pretty realistic in terms of what happens throughout an actual NFL draft.
Right. And I think that that's kind of a misconception that there is a realistic setting on the NFL mock draft database simulator, which we are using and have been a partner with us all the way up to our now mock draft 12.0, our final mock draft of the season. We really appreciate Denny over there at NFL mock draft database. You know, they'll be sponsoring our episodes throughout the end of the draft too. So, I mean, you're still going to be hearing about the NFL mock draft database, but I just want to give a big shout out to him. Thank you for supporting us, Denny, and everything that you do at the NFL Mock Draft Database. It's been a pleasure, really, to be able to run this simulator every week and have your support and your blessing, and have everybody else send us mock drafts in too. That's been a really
Mhm.
cool thing, is people sending us in mock drafts. Get to see what other people think and get other people's opinions. That's what I really like about the mock draft simulator.
Yeah, and we can start the 2022 hashtag RTKMock if we really wanted to.
We
Now,
could.
I know for me personally, I'm going to take a little bit of time away from the draft after the stuff I've been doing, but we can't stay away for too long, and that'll start coming back up. And the database is up to date with this year, I believe, next year's prospects, previous year's prospects. It is just a phenomenal tool.
It is, and you can do the 2022 and 2023 mock drafts. It is only the first round, though. And I've already done some Chiefs ones for 2022 and 2023, believe it or not. But with the settings we're going to be rolling with today, obviously 7 rounds, pre-draft, preferred draft order, normal speed, aggressive setting, and I think that the aggressive setting is something that is more realistic than the realistic, if that makes sense. I think the aggressive has a little bit more realistic components than the maybe the realistic does. The realistic kind of sticks to their big board a little bit better than what I think actual people drafting do. And we're going to go with the strict trading. That's what we will do on today's podcast. This is the last one before the NFL draft. We got 57 picks for our selection, Jordan.
Yeah, I'm fine with it, I guess. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just one of those things where really half the time at 31, we'd see someone like Eichenberg and then say, oh, okay, I guess that's the pick. Like, we took so many offensive linemen. We didn't really love the board at that point. I think at 58, a lot of stuff can happen. Like, guys can slide, guys can creep up and be overdrafted. It's really a more interesting pick. And then having that really close one at 63. Now, the real kicker is going to be no picks between 63 and 144, or I guess
Yeah.
64 and 143, however you want to look at that. But it's a wide variety of other teams picking and the Chiefs just kind of sitting there waiting. So Brett Veach mentioned the hot spot of the draft being that late second round, early third round spot.
Hmm.
He's going to have a couple chances to kind of make some stuff happen there.
He really will. And I think another wrinkle we're going to add in with this draft to kind of make it a little bit more realistic, to kind of negate the guys that fall down that probably shouldn't. We're going to be taking away the top 5 players off the board. So after we take away the top 5, then we have our crop of players to select, kind of to, I guess, overcorrect maybe in terms of what the Chiefs should do. And here they've got a whole lot of options. I talked about this on the podcast too. I feel like a weight has been lifted off of our shoulders because you don't have to focus on offensive tackle. You don't have to focus on getting an edge rusher. You can really take the best player available. And when I look at pick number 58 here, the top 5 guys we are not going to be selecting: Dylan Reduns from North Dakota State, Wyatt Davis, Ohio State, Javon Holland from Oregon, Afitu Melifonwu from Syracuse. For some reason, I was having a hard time deciding what that logo was in my head. And Quinn Miners from Wisconsin Whitewater. So that means we got some good guys here available at 58. Amunra St. Brown, Kelvin Joseph, Diami Brown, Baron Browning, Aaron Robinson, Tylan Wallace, Peyton Turner, Josh Myers, Jackson Carman, Michael Carter, Walker Little, Brevin Jordan's still there, Alim McNeil, Brady Christensen, Amari Rogers, Andre Cisco. Anybody pique your fancy there, Jordan?
I think, where is Turner ranked on that board? Is he 80 these days?
He's 69. Nice.
Nice. So if we don't go with him here, he may not be there at 63, but if we don't go wide
Well,
receiver here, then all 3 of those guys could be in that top 5 by the time 63 rolls. I mean, it's only 5 picks, but still, if 2 guys go, you know what I mean?
right. I think that if you're saying like if we don't pick a Munra or Diami,
Hmm.
those guys, if they don't go, will be in the top 5 and we won't be able to select them.
Okay, so we'll probably need to go wide out, then hope that Peyton
Yeah.
Turner doesn't randomly go by 63.
Right. I like the selections here with Amunra and Diami. If they're both available at the Chiefs at 53, I'll be pretty happy because I really do expect kind of Diami and Amunra both to kind of be gone. I think they're both really good talents. And who do you like better, Jordan?
I like what Amunra can bring instantly a little bit
Mm,
more. And the same thing with Tylan Wallace, but I like the ceiling of Diami more than both of those guys. I think he has really, really good high end number 2, like stud receiver potential. But he's a little bit underdeveloped in terms of underneath route running and stuff like that, running the full tree, um, beating press, stuff like that. Amunra, people worry about him being able to play on the outside. That's something that would we'd have to take into account here. And then Tylan, you just know what you're getting. Like, you get a guy who can run good routes. He has reliable hands. He can beat press. He's proven he can do that. So I don't really have a huge preference either way here, but I think that rookie wideouts in the Reed system, I don't know if any of these guys are going to necessarily take all those snaps away from Robinson. Like, I just
mm.
don't know if in year 1 what their role is going to look like. So I think that maybe we lean Diami just because of that potential.
Yeah, I like Diami too. Dynamic Diami is what you
Yeah.
like. You've coined the nickname for him, and he is really dynamic. In the North Carolina offense, he played a lot of deep balls, and he
Yeah.
didn't have to run the underneath routes, so we haven't seen a whole lot of underneath routes from him. I think that he could do it. I mean, it's one of those things where you got to learn it and then you got to practice it and everything like that. Just because the route tree that he was given in North Carolina isn't necessarily the route tree that we Kansas City that we want him to run, right? So I think that's a good pick there, Diami Brown at 58. Do you think about maybe going Kelvin Joseph? That's a guy who's been mocked a whole lot here.
I don't. And if this is the clip that we cut for the podcast, people are going to say or see that I made a frowny face. And I don't dislike Keldon Joseph, but I just, compared to the board, I think that there are a bunch of other guys. Like if it was Melifonwu that we could take, I think he's a future stud. And I'm
Mm.
not quite that much sold on Joseph. So I think given the board and given the positional need now and later, that we probably go wide out and then hope for Peyton Turner at 63.
I'm with that. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Diami Brown here at 58. I think that's a really good selection and kind of hope that Peyton Turner does not go in these little 4 picks here. And he does not. And he also is falling outside of our 5-player range.
Let's go.
Yep. So Dylan Dunswhite, Davis, Javon Holland, Quinn Miners, Baron Browning were our 5. So Peyton Turner, we're going to take him at 63. Couple pretty good, solid players right there, back to back. I wouldn't be surprised if Peyton Turner goes before those picks, though. I've said in our Discord too that I think Peyton Turner could be a guy that I think the league is higher on than people outside of the league are.
Him and Joe Tryon both, I think, are
Mm-hmm.
guys that Tryon could be a first round pick. I think he literally could be that back half of the first round, like at 30 or 31. Peyton Turner, not too far behind him. Peyton Turner is a raw player in terms of his process and stacking his moves together, but he has the strength, extremely strong and explosive player. He has the measurements, he has the arm length and all that stuff, and his motor never stops. Like he's always running. And I know I can rant about Peyton Turner because we don't have a pick here for a billion picks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like what he brings to the table. And if you're not getting one of those premier edge rushers at the top of the draft, you might as well take a guy that has a few redeeming qualities and traits that you like. And the Chiefs, he has 3 traits that they like in terms of he checks off the measurable boxes. He would be a good fit with the system, I think. And he also has a high ceiling.
I think he's also got a pretty high bench press too.
Yeah.
Not one of the bigger, I guess in air quotes,
I'm going to pull it
bigger.
up while you're talking.
Yeah, one of the bigger categories that Steve Spagnuolo certainly likes, but it's one that they do consider because there are some guys. I think it's a 21 bench press. Matt Lane over at Arrowhead probably did a really good write up in the Arrowhead report. Nope, too bad. I wish they were at Arrowhead report. The Arrowhead Pride Draft Guide. He did a good write up about the Spags type, and I think that was something that I noticed is that like Peyton Turner literally checks every single one of their boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm still looking here, so I need you to stall for a sec. Oh, here we go.
Okay,
The bench, he did 23 on the bench, and he
perfect.
that was before some of the other measurements. But I think that, man, he's just such a strong and explosive guy, and the ceiling is there, the floor is there. I think the Chiefs, you might as well use that 63rd pick on a guy that has some things that you need, is at a position that you're going to need in the long term. I think he's a guy that can set an edge against the run in the long run. So I think Peyton Turner is a really, really good pick.
So when we look at 144, we finally rolled up on our pick here in the NFL Mock Draft Database Simulator. Israel Mukuamu, Derek Barnes, Khalil Herbert, Deontay Smith, Kerry Vincent. Those are the guys we cannot select. So anything under 145 on their big board. So we're looking at Thomas Graham, Cornell Powell, Chuba Hubbard, Jacoby Stevens. Ooh, that one piques my interest. Demetric Felton, Rodarius Williams, Patrick Johnson. So what do you think here, Jordan? We honestly addressed the Chiefs' 2 biggest needs in this draft already with 58 and 63. Usually, I think from here on out, we can go best player available. What do you think is next?
I like Jacoby Stevens. I really do. I want to check out. Let's look at the interior offensive line board
Mm-hmm.
because I know that a guy like um, I'm drawing a blank. I just drafted him like 50 times in the. Oh, David Moore. If David
Mm-hmm.
Moore is there, then I think he's rising a little bit, and I don't know if he'll be there at pick 175. So I think that
Yeah.
might be a pick in terms of a future center if he hasn't already gone, because that's also a possibility.
Yeah, so what we have available, all the interior offensive linemen are available. Drew Dalman is the best available interior offensive lineman from Stanford. David Moore, Robert Jones, Bryce Hargrove, Jack Anderson, Trey Hill. I like David Moore a lot. He had a really good Senior Bowl. Didn't call it the
Mhm.
Pro Bowl. Had a good Senior Bowl. Had a good pro day. I'm okay with that pick there. Jacoby Stevens is somebody that really piques my interest, though, in terms of just the potential he could have in the defense with Steve Spagnuolo. He's a versatile guy. It's we've seen Spags love versatile guys all across the field. So that's the only that'd be the only these would be the only two that I would debate at this position. I would say.
Yeah, I think so too. And man, it's tough. I think I'm gonna lean David Moore just a little bit because you need a guard and a center long
Yeah.
term, and I still think he's a future center at the NFL, but he does have that guard experience. And Stevens, I think it's safety. You can get some safety depth a little bit later, perhaps.
Hmm.
And interior offensive line, that board just doesn't look great. Like it's either more Kendrick Green, who probably is already gone.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm almost certain because I'm pretty sure he's ranked way higher than this pick, and like Drake Jackson. Like there just aren't a ton of options later on. So I like the Moore pick. I don't think that's a reach. Like he's a guy where if the Chiefs took him at 63, I'd be a little bit like, oh, okay, but I wouldn't be angry. Like at
Hmm.
144, I don't think he's going to last that long in real life. So if he's there in this simulation, then let's just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's kind of the one thing that when we're looking at these boards, you have to think about what the depth is going to be of the class later on. And there are a lot of good safeties later on in this draft. So I do think that taking the interior guy here is a smart move. So David Moore at 144, the interior guy from Grambling State. He kind of checks the boxes too for what the Chiefs like in terms of small school guy, went to the Senior Bowl, performed well at the Senior Bowl. Later round 144 is in what, round 5, so that's kind of a later round pick. It seems like one of those good little concoctions there meant for the Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he has the ceiling. Like that guy has a clear floor, but I think also could be a really productive player. He has a mean streak, really strong guy. So I think that that's a good pick. And then at 175 and 181, you can do some damage here in terms of the board won't be that much different at either pick. You can go
Hmm.
best player available. Like probably these are three of the bigger needs for the Chiefs. I think linebacker would still be one, and then safety, but a wideout long term, and an edge long term, and a starting interior lineman long term. That's a really good start.
So looking at 175, the players we cannot select: Simi Fioco, Brendan Jameis, Jonathan Cooper, Buddy Johnson, Dan Moore. A couple A&M guys right there.
Yeah.
So when we start looking at who we can select 177 and below on the big board here, Trevon Grimes, Garrett Wallow, Malcolm Kuntz, Trey McKitty, Chauncey Golston. I'm going to go over to the linebacker board, see what we got there. Obviously, we can't select Buddy Johnson, Isaiah McDuffie there. Charles Snowden will more than likely be there at the very end. He's 250 on their big board here. The linebacker depth I think is interesting because it seems like it's pretty good in round like what, 3, the
Hmm.
round the Chiefs don't have a pick in.
There's a
So
big
like
drop off.
right, then there's a big drop off. So that's kind of tough with the little layoff there from 63 to 144. So what do you think here when it comes to linebacker? Do you try to address it at 207 then?
Yeah, I think that with the board the way it is, like you see if Snowden or um, Justin Hilliard or Agbogbamiga
Hmm.
or guys like that, the kid from Illinois, Milo Eifler, like there's just options there that some of those guys are like 300, 400 on the board, so that's always going to be an option for us. And given the board, I think you can go like a interior defensive lineman, you can go a corner, you can go a safety. You could go Trey McKitty as a developmental tight end too. I
Hmm.
don't hate that, but I think we hit those three levels of the defense first.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I'm looking at cornerback here, Zach McPherson, the kid from Oregon. Is it Demorador Lenore?
Yeah,
And
I'm gonna let you go with that.
yeah, Mark Gilbert, Keith Taylor, Rashad Wild Goose. At safety, Richard LeCount, DeMar Hamlin, Trey Norwood, Derek Forrest, Christian Uphoff, Tariq Thompson, who you have a 100 and 100 about, by the way. Tariq Thompson, go check that out on arrowheadreport.com. And what was the other position you wanted to look at? Cornerback, safety, and
I believe it was tight end, I think.
tight end. Yes. Okay. So Trey McKitty is there. Oh, and Jacob Harris. Shout out Jacob Harris at Arrowhead Report. He was saying that the Chiefs should draft Jacob Harris. Noah Gray and Nick Eubanks is there, Matt Bushman later on, John Bates. I know a lot of people like the kid from Boise State. Let's see here. Maybe offensive tackle, Jalon Moore. He fits the prototype.
Man,
Alaric
I
Jackson, Tommy Doyle.
what
Those guys all.
look at cornerback for Wild Goose. Where is he ranked? And then where is Tariq Thompson ranked?
Wild Goose is ranked 208 on their big board, and
Okay.
Tariq Thompson, I assume you're talking about, is 261 on their big board.
Okay.
I don't hate either of those moves. I'm gonna look interior defensive line for the fun of it. Darius Stills to Daryl Slayton, Jonathan Marshall. Yeah, Isaiah Loudermilk is there. I just love his name. It's a good name, Loudermilk. Um, I think that's really, we don't really need to look at wide receiver again. I mean, we could. Can't take Simi, but a lot of the guys that we like to take in the mid rounds are no longer there. Dax Maline is there. I know that you've is that how you say his name?
Milne.
Meline? Milne? I was trying too hard on that one.
Hey,
I was just
we're
trying
we're
too
at the
hard.
deep cuts. We're at the deep cuts of the draft.
These are certainly deep cuts. We're talking about round 5 prospects here. I do like Wild Goose. I think Wild Goose is a good guy, but he's a slot corner, right? I'm not wrong
Yeah,
in saying that.
I think he has experience on the outside, but at the NFL, I'm with you. I think he's definitely a slot. But I think you could go him and Tariq Thompson, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
be 100% fine with that. And then a linebacker to round it out, and I'd be 100% cool with it.
Defense heavy draft, but I guess that we kind of we took 2 out of 3 of an offense in our first 2 picks or first 3 picks. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
go with Wild Goose here because I do like Wild Goose. I'll go with him at 175, and then the Chiefs just have another pick at 181. So here we're gonna be looking at the board, make sure that our guy didn't fall into the top 5 zone. He did not. So at safety, Tariq Thompson, you good with that at 181?
Yeah, I have a 4th round grade on him. I think I was trying to pull up my scout, and my computer was acting weird. Shout out to Apple. We've had conversations about that. We should have a whole podcast about how like Connor, we're stuck with Apple. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's the ecosystem, it's the interactivity, it's the
It is.
usability, all that stuff. But not to go too far off the beaten path here. Tariq Thompson he's a really smart player. He's instinctual. I think he had like 23 passes broken up in his career at San Diego State. He's just a very smart player, a little bit limited as an athlete, but I think at that point in the draft, you're kind of just looking at guys like that.
Right.
Really high floor, I think, in the NFL. And for a guy, Dan Sorensen, like a couple of those traits kind of remind people of that. But I think Thompson has a going to be a better player than Sorensen was, or at least at that level. So I think at 181, that's a good pick. And then at 207, you can go best player available or round up the rest of whatever's left at linebacker.
Yeah, so let's look at the 5 players that we cannot pick. Chauncey Golston, Isaiah McDuffie, Chris Evans, the kid from Oregon who has a mouthful of a name, an alphabet soup of a name, and Jamar Jefferson from Oregon State. So we could take Keith Taylor, Shane Bouchele, Jamie Newman. Those are 2 quarterbacks. Justin Hilliard. Do you like Hilliard? It seems like Ohio State has 15 different linebackers out this year.
Yeah, Hilliard's a guy where like he's not a Sam because he doesn't weigh enough. But he plays like a Sam. Like he's really physical and can make the splash play. And Milo Eifler from Illinois is a guy like that, but he's also closer to the prototype and also probably a better athlete. So I would go him over Hilliard, and then Agbong Bamiga, I think, is a guy that could play the Sam role, and I've practiced saying his name several times. So Amen Agbong Bamiga, it's almost harder to type than say, but I can't decide
Mm-hmm.
which one is worse. But I'd go Eifler, or we'll go AO, so I don't have to say it again, from Oklahoma State.
Okay. So I'm looking at the board here for linebackers. Everybody except Isaiah McDuffie is on the board here for us. So, I mean, I don't have you looked at Patty Fisher? I can't remember in your 100 and 100 if you looked at Patty Fisher or not.
I looked at Patty Fisher outside of the 100 and 100, and I wasn't a big fan of what I saw from Patty Fisher. So he
Fair.
was on, like, I had a list of guys that in my notebook that I was like, I'll check them out and see if I like them. And then I like would either watch them and then see what they measured at and like take them off the board, or vice versa. So not a huge Patty Fisher guy personally.
Also, Nick Neiman on the board. Um, could also take him. I do like Amen. I think that he's good. I know he had a little bit of a drop off. Was it injuries that caused that drop off, or what was it?
I don't believe it was injuries. He was a team captain. It's just he's a limited player. Like
Mm,
he's not good in coverage. He's kind of a guy where he can stack and shed, and he's really decisive in run defense. But his awareness in short zones, like he just doesn't move very well in space like that, which is ironic because he can do it in the run game and can change
yeah.
directions. But then when he drops back, it just isn't the same. So kind of stiff hipped. And Milo
Hmm.
Eifler, I think, has the higher ceiling. Like he's one of the highest ceiling round 6, round 7 guys out there, even around 5. Like I'd be fine with him there. Tremendous athlete, big hitter, aggressive player, more upside in coverage than Ogbong Bamiga, but also Eifler weighs less, I believe. Like I think there's a significant size disparity. So it's kind of a matter of, do you want a guy who has the potential to be a will linebacker at the next level, or do you want a guy who has played Mike, probably more of a Sam? I think Ogbong makes more sense for the Chiefs, but if I wanted a fun pick, I'd go Milo Eifler.
Do you think that Amen makes more sense than Charles Snowden? Because Charles Snowden's still on the board there. I know that you're pretty big on Snowden as well.
Yeah, Snowden, I just don't know if he's a 4-3 Sam. And
Mm,
there was an interview he did, I think it was with Matt Verderam from Fansided that I read. He's kind of broke himself down as a 3-4 Sam and said that he likes kind of doing that role better, but he's comfortable in both. So that's another high upside athlete. Like Snowden's just a very raw player, and I think that he'd be fun with the Chiefs. But what they need, then you have to take into account what they need right now. Like, because Adbong Bamiga, I think he could have a clear path to seeing actual snaps on the field this
hmm.
season for the Chiefs. Snowden, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. So I guess we can lead Amen. And people are going to be mad if they go back and see Snowden was on the board because he's a more recognizable name and a guy
Hmm.
that a lot of people have talked about. But I think either way, like you're getting it's a end of day 3 upside like impact linebacker. That's kind of the pick you're going with.
I trust your judgment on these
Okay.
late round
The
linebackers.
deep cuts.
So the deep cuts of the linebackers, I trust your judgment on them. I wanted to pick your brain about them for a little bit to see what your thoughts were. So I'm gonna go Bamiga. Is that how you say it? Um,
Yeah.
Ahmed Bamiga is our final pick there. I'm not gonna try to write that down on my sheet. I'm just gonna write AO and then he's a linebacker, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that'll wrap up our draft there. I like this draft. It does address a lot of the needs that the Chiefs have, and I think it also addresses the depth issues that the Chiefs have as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a future starter in Miami, hopefully with a high ceiling. You get Peyton Turner, who can take over in a year, ideally. David Moore, same case. Wild Goose, him and Fenton, kind of the best man wins. They're very similar players. Tariq Thompson, these are, again, guys where people, there are two types of people. Well, there's really more than two, but I'm going to split it 50-50. People that look at mock drafts. One, day one starters, how many do we have? And we look at, I mean, maybe one with Diami, I guess.
Yeah.
Like you're splitting half a point to Diami, half a point to Ogbong Bamiga. And I don't know if either of them are. So that could be no day one starters. I think you get one. But then you look at how many guys have paths to significant roles in the future. You get 1, 2, 3, maybe even 5, like 4 or 5 guys. So I think that kind of a foresight draft, that
Hmm.
perspective, it was a really good one. And that one that at the end of the 2021 campaign, people can't really look back and judge. It's one of those where you have to wait a couple years before you take a further look at.
And there's nothing really wrong with that. I know a lot of people will be upset, be like, "Oh, you didn't pick any starters, or you picked a guy who's not going to start for a while." Okay. I mean, that's not what the draft is about, right? The
Yeah.
draft isn't about finding players that can make immediate impact. It's all really cool if they can. That's why the bad teams get the earlier picks is because they need guys that can come and make an immediate impact. And that's what you're going to get early on in the draft. With the Chiefs' first picks being in round 2, you can't really expect them to draft like 4 or 5 players that are going
Mhm.
to come in and make immediate impact. It's just not how their draft picks are set up. That's just not how really the draft is set up a whole lot of the times. Patrick Mahomes didn't come in year one and was not a year one contributor. Yeah, I know it's a different situation there, but he was
Mhm.
picked in the top 10. So I think that there is something there that you have to be patient with the draft. You can't just expect to change your whole team with the NFL draft. That's not how it works. Free agency is kind of how you do that. Free agency is how you develop for now, how you get better for now. The draft is how you get better for later. And I think that this draft does a good job of getting better for later.
Yep, I'm with you 100% on that, man.
So, Jordan, I appreciate you joining me on this podcast, this episode of Roughing the Kicker. Thought we were going to do it under 40 minutes. Maybe we're just south of it. It's going to be pretty close, even though the Chiefs have what, 2 less picks, I guess. So we still used 40 minutes of your time to talk about 2 less picks. So, Jordan, once again, always a pleasure to talk with you. Jordan's going to be with me all weekend. We're going to be talking about the NFL drafts with Jordan, and we're going to be recapping each day, previewing each day. And I think that you guys are really going to enjoy the content that we're going to have. So, Jordan, once again, it's always a pleasure.
Yep, thanks a lot.
Go follow Jordan on Twitter at Footnoted to learn everything you need to know about the draft. Go check out his 100 and 100 series where he looks at 100 players in 100 days. It's day 99, so now you can go back and look at almost all of the players that he has looked at this season. There's a homepage on arrowheadreport.com where you can go, landing page, Command F it, Control F it, no matter what device you're on, as we kind of mentioned earlier. You can look it up, search for what players you want and see what Jordan has on them, see what grade he gives them. And you could be set for the NFL draft on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We're no longer going to be doing a live stream for Thursday just because the Chiefs don't have a pick. And I think we're going to be kind of scoping out the AFC West, seeing what the AFC West is going to do. We'll be recording podcasts. There'll be plenty of content for you guys to consume, whether on YouTube, our podcast feed, whatever it is. So if you're watching this video on YouTube, make sure to give it a like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you're listening to this on podcast, give us a 5-star review. Those mean a lot on the iTunes, and also give us a follow on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. Tomorrow, Jordan will be joining me again with Connor Christopherson. We're going to be doing a mailbag, kind of wrapping up the NFL draft before we head into it on Thursday night. So until then, I'll talk to you tomorrow.